All right, Alexander, we have done a bunch of videos on this topic, but now it is out in the open. As you were telling me before we started recording, Boris Johnson versus Rishi Sunak. This is the grudge match. This is the fight for the title to be the Prime Minister of the UK. Boris is currently the Prime Minister right now, but he's being challenged by Rishi Sunak. What is going on here? This is some real party infighting, some government infighting. Sunak has been appointed by Boris Johnson as well. I mean, he is an appointee of Boris Johnson. So interesting that he's going after the top position.
Absolutely. But before I start, can I just say that if you wanted to know that there was a battle going on between Sunak and Johnson, then you should really go to the Duran, because we've been talking about this for months. We started first talking about this in the autumn. I mean, we have our ear to the ground in Britain. Of course, I live here, and I know some of the people involved. And to put it mildly, though, I want to stress none of them have spoken to me at any time. But we figured this out long before any part of the mainstream media, or indeed alternative media, did, that Boris Johnson was coming under attack, that this was an orchestrated thing, and that Rishi Sunak was clearly and straightforwardly the enemy. Now, what has happened is that over the last week or so, this thing that we've been talking about for months has now burst into the open. We've had open disagreements between Sunak and Johnson about the direction of economic policy, about the direction of many other types of policy. We see Johnson wanting to pursue a policy that he thinks is going to be much closer to the wishes and aspirations of the people in the so-called Red Wall, those former Labour industrial constituencies that voted Conservative in 2019 because the Conservatives were promising to do Brexit, to get Brexit done, and because they trusted Boris Johnson to get Brexit done. So he's very keen on honouring his promises to those voters. Sunak, by contrast, wants to pursue different sorts of economic policies. He wants to rein in spending, for example. He wants to return to austerity. But ultimately, what he also wants, and I've no doubt about this, is to repair bridges to the European Union. And that's what has happened. It all started with a change in the United States. It even began before the election itself, but at a time when it was increasingly looking as if there would be a change of administration in the United States. With Donald Trump gone, Boris Johnson was beginning to look increasingly isolated. And we see that Boris Johnson's critics and enemies in the Conservative Party have coalesced around Rishi Sunak, who they have been systematically building up over the last year as the alternative, the person to lead Britain instead of Johnson. And of course, they've been making all kinds of criticisms of Boris Johnson, saying that he's lazy, that he's incompetent, that he's a poor manager, that he's corrupt. I agree with all of those, except that I don't really think he's corrupt. I think he's sloppy sometimes, but I don't think he's corrupt in any way that other British politicians are not. But that's what has been happening. And you were absolutely right. It was Boris Johnson who appointed Rishi Sunak to his post. Rishi Sunak has risen under Boris Johnson's wing. But in British politics, especially in Conservative politics, there is no honour or loyalty amongst Conservative politicians. And now, as I said, that he's in a position to challenge Johnson, he's doing it. We know that this is out in the open because even Johnson himself, a few days ago, admitted he let slip out that he was looking for ways to sack Sunak and make him health secretary. In other words, downgrade him from the post of finance minister. And an awful lot of people in the Conservative Party then mobilised to stop that happening. And of course, the media went out of its way, also trying to stop it happening. And if you go to the British media today, you will find all sorts of interesting articles appearing, like dividing lines, the main issues Boris and Rishi Sunak disagree on, and other articles like is in Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor will win. We need a SWAT. A SWAT is a person who works very hard right now. And that's the kind of articles and headlines that's appearing right across the British media at the moment.
So the media is front running this. Is there a process involved here for the Sunak faction, for Sunak himself and the faction to take power, or what's happening here exactly? I mean, this isn't like out in the open. We don't have Rishi Sunak coming out with statements and saying, look, we need elections or snap elections, or we need a vote within the party or something like that. This is right now the media front running everything, and there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. But is there a process that will play out in time to the public, or will this all be like backroom kind of dealings?
It'll be a combination of both. The usual way this happens is that, well, there's two ways this can happen. The first, which is the traditional Conservative way, and Conservative Prime Ministers have fallen in the past through it. Anthony Eden in the 50s, Harold Macmillan in the 60s, they suddenly become ill. It's announced that they've become ill, and they resign for reasons of health after it's become clear to them that their support in the parliamentary party and in the cabinet has collapsed. And then there's a leadership election, and the anointed leader, who will be Rishi Sunak, rises and takes over. So that's one way forward. There is the other way, which is that the leader digs in and fights. And at that point, the classic way to try to undermine the leader after you've endlessly spoken out against him is that sooner or later you run what's called a candidate against him in a leadership election in the parliamentary party who's not the real opponent. So you have Rishi Sunak going out saying, he still supports Johnson. Somebody else is put up to do it. That drains support from the leader away, and that eventually makes the leader's position increasingly precarious. That was what happened with Margaret Thatcher, and it was what was threatened against Theresa May. So that's the other way of doing it. And then eventually the leader's position becomes untenable, and the leader is either forced to resign or is defeated in a leadership election. But can I say that at the moment we're perhaps running a little bit fast and ahead of ourselves, because this attack on Johnson is very widespread, and it is becoming increasingly clear that a large part of the Conservative Party, the parliamentary party, is signed up to it, and the business community, the Remainer business community wants it, and the Remainer class based in London want it too. I still think Johnson still has a lot of support in the Conservative Party, not so much in Parliament, but in the country. And I think that an overt move to overthrow him now would be unpopular with many Conservatives. So I think that he's far from having given up, but he will probably fight and stand and fight. But it's clear that we see a battle now underway.
Right. How does he fight? Like, what are the moves that he needs to take right now in order to nip this in the bud, so to speak, before it really does gain momentum and it moves outside of media and starts to become mainstream, both in the public and in the Conservative Party? What does he have to do?
Right, he has to do that which he was talking about doing over the weekend, which he's got to sack Sunak. He doesn't need to throw him out of the cabinet entirely, that's possible, but he does need to bring him down. He can't remain Chancellor or Finance Minister for very long, because Sunak is draining support away from Johnson by being in this position which he is. So he's got to find a way of getting Sunak out of the position of Finance Minister or Chancellor, which Sunak currently has. Now, the media has built up Sunak as this financial genius, which he is not, and this economic genius, which he also is not. But it is a legend, a myth that has been created, and which makes it very difficult for the moment for Johnson to sack him. So he's got to start acting in a way that undermines that myth. In other words, he's got to start doing the same thing that Sunak and his supporters are doing to Johnson. They're basically saying that Johnson is an incompetent prime minister and a bad manager. Johnson now needs to start saying, well, Sunak is an overrated chancellor. He's not financially competent or capable. He's not running things as well as people say. He's creating all kinds of problems in the future, all of which is true, by the way. And that in the light of this, we need somebody else who's better positioned to take over. And the other thing Johnson needs to do is he needs to have someone ready to take over. And the person I think he should perhaps be looking at is Kwasi Kwarteng, who is the business secretary, who is managed to stay out of the factional fighting for the moment, has a long background as a Remainer, as a supporter of Brexit, not as a Remainer, I mean the opposite, as a Brexiteer, very hard-line Brexiteer, by the way. He's, by all accounts, doing well as business secretary, and is also well connected in the media and has support within the Conservative Party. So I think Johnson needs to undermine Sunak and probably start to build up Kwarteng. And we have this battle now playing out. It's not clear to me at the moment who's going to win. My money, if anything, would still be on Johnson winning, but Johnson needs to start fighting back because Sunak has been allowed to fight and build up support over a very long time, and it's worked against Johnson by him not pushing back sooner. At least that's my view.
Right. And Johnson, I imagine, is going to have to start recruiting the media outlets that are friendly to him to start,
Exactly.
One is removing Sunak in as best a way that he can without stirring up a lot of controversy. And the second way is to build up Kwarteng, you said?
His name is Kwasi Kwarteng. One of the interesting things, by the way.
Kwasi Kwarteng.
Kwarteng, yes. He would be the first black finance minister that Britain has had. He is the son of Ghanaian chiefs, Ghanaian aristocracy, and he's been to Eton, and Sunak has been to Winchester, which is still very much the world of the English public schools that they all go to. But anyway, that's what it's all about at the moment.
Right. So can you say that one, Boris brought this onto himself? You mentioned that he is a sloppy type of manager. Yes, he delivered Brexit, but when it comes to just daily administration and doing the grind of day-to-day governing, he kind of drops the ball very often. I guess you could say he's not exactly the most organized of administrators. So he did bring this onto himself in that type of fashion. I'm not sure what his approval ratings are right now, but my feeling is that he has lost a lot of popularity. And the second thing, actually, I was going to say two things, but there are three things. The second thing is Dominic Cummings definitely went to undermine him, and there might be some Sunak connection there as well. I don't know, just speculation. We've talked about this in other videos. And the third thing is, he let the fox in the hen house. Did he not see that? I mean, we kind of saw that in Sunak, that this was an ambitious guy. Also also pro-Brexit as well. I think Sunak was very pro-Brexit, but his ambition was not hidden. I mean, this guy's pretty much announced that I am going to be running for the top spot sooner or later. So.
Exactly. I think you're right on all those counts. Firstly, I mean, Johnson is a sloppy prime minister. He's not a great manager. Nobody pretends that he is. Even he probably would admit that he's not a great manager. He's not a details person at all. I mean, I think he has to accept that he's got to put together, if he's not prepared to do it, he's got to create an office in Downing Street that will be able to do that thing for him. He's got to get himself a really competent chief of staff. Those people exist, by the way. The Conservative Party is full of them. He's got to find someone who's both loyal and capable. Now, Cummings was capable in some ways, but it's now absolutely clear that he wasn't really loyal. And it's absolutely clear, by the way, to my mind, that Cummings and Sunak were working extremely closely together. And it's been striking that Cummings, in his criticisms of Johnson, has been going out of his way to talk up Sunak. And it is universally known in Britain that the reason why Johnson appointed Sunak finance minister was because Cummings advised him to. So Cummings and Sunak are basically very closely aligned with each other. And that's an important thing to grasp. But having said that, given what a crazily ambitious, sorry to put it like that, a person Sunak is, and given what a slippery character Cummings is, you're absolutely right. Johnson took his eye off the ball. He did let the fox into the hen house. He should have understood much more quickly that what was actually happening is that he appointed in Cummings an overambitious, overpowerful chief of staff who was not really loyal to Johnson. Cummings isn't loyal to anybody. Cummings is a life unto himself. And that Cummings, what Cummings was doing was that he was placing people in the cabinet and in the civil service who were connected to Cummings and arguably loyal to Cummings more than they were to Johnson. And that, in fact, he misjudged Cummings completely. Cummings has a lot of political skills. He's a clever man, not as clever as he thinks, by the way, but he was certainly not somebody that Johnson should have brought right into the centre of government in the way that he did. And it was a mistake on Johnson's part. He now needs to find a more reliable chief of staff. He needs to break up this grouping that has emerged with the Conservative Party. And we must also understand that though Cummings, as you correctly said, is a committed Brexiteer, and Sunak has a history of being a committed Brexiteer, in my opinion, Sunak's ambition is so great that he will basically forget all about that. And he's now quite obviously and openly angling for the support of the Remainers, who are still strong in the Conservative Party, and that this is something that Johnson should have realised and should have understood and should have calculated for. So he's got to break Sunak, break Cummings, this Cummings-Sunak Remainer axis that has developed. He's got to find people he trusts. He's got to reorganise his Downing Street operation. And I still think that the person he's got to promote is Kwarteng. Kwarteng, by the way, very similar in some respects to Sunak. I think probably more competent than Sunak from what I've seen. Less ambitious. I mean, he was prepared to go against David Cameron when he was Prime Minister and Theresa May. And that kept him on the backbenches for a very long time. And that suggests a rather more solid person than Sunak is.
Right. Final question. It sounds to me that, listening to you, that both Sunak and Johnson were Brexit. They pushed for Brexit. But they're also interesting because I get the sense that they're also both globalists. So they've got this globalist feel to them in different ways. Boris Johnson and Sunak are different types of globalists, I think. But they were also pushing for Brexit. What policy similarities and differences do you see between the two men? Like, what would a Sunak government do differently than a Johnson government?
Yeah, I do think that Sunak is closer to the business community. At least when I say talk about the business community, I should say the part of the business community that is very much tied into globalization. Johnson is not a businessman.
Not like small, medium.
Not like small, medium businesses, nothing like that. I mean, he's a person, he's from the billionaire class. I mean, he belongs to the billionaire class. He's married into the billionaire class. He's very rich on his own part. He's very much from that part of the world. And Johnson himself, without being from that class himself. He doesn't have that kind of money. He's still very much, as you absolutely said, very much part of the globalist world, supported Brexit. But remember, he was very dithery about doing so initially. He wasn't sure that he wanted Brexit or not. He eventually opted to support Brexit, but he famously wrote 2 articles, one supporting Brexit, one opposing Brexit at the same time, at the time the Brexit referendum was called, and then decided that it made more sense for him to support Brexit than oppose it. Doesn't suggest tremendous sense of a depth of commitment to this. At the moment, and I have to say this, I think there's a great shortage of people in the British government who have what you might call a sovereigntist approach. And that is a real problem. I mean, you don't have the kind of people who are more interested in looking for solutions within Britain itself. Johnson talks about global Britain. Sunak is connected to international big money. The kind of political leader who might be more focused on what small and medium-sized businesses do. I don't really see such a person in the government at the moment. I suspect that Kwarteng might be a little bit more sympathetic to that. But, you know, he's worked in the city too. He was at Cazenove, one of the big finance firms. I think it's been absorbed now by another one, but he worked in, you know, finance. He also is connected to that world. If you want to find a sovereigntist politician in Britain, you have to go to Nigel Farage. He is the person who calls for those sort of things.
All right, interesting. Very interesting development.
Very interesting development. Yeah. But notice another thing. We've done a whole programme about British politics, and we haven't talked about the main opposition party, which is the Labour Party, which is going nowhere. I mean, it's fascinating to see how all political energy is draining out of the Labour Party, and the only real politics that matters, as far as I can see now, is between Conservative Party factions. I mean, Labour is. I mean, it's as if it didn't exist anymore. It's also fighting factional battles, but to my mind, they are of insignificant importance to the British people. They're important for the Labour Party and who runs it, but in effect what they mean is that Britain doesn't have an official opposition at the moment.
A one-party system.
A one-party system.
It's very dangerous.
Very dangerous, in which factions fight each other.
Yeah, that's why they're fighting for absolute power. But very, very interesting development. Very, very worrying in a way as well.
Very worrying. Yeah, and unfortunate. Sad that it should happen at this time when Britain has many opportunities it could be developing and building on. But there it is.
Oh yeah, it's free from the EU. It could soar now. Free from the EU.
Absolutely.
That alone means that the opportunities are endless. But oh well, we'll continue to follow this.
It certainly will. It's certainly interesting to watch.
Definitely. All right, everybody. Another thing that's interesting is when you go to Locals, theduran.locals.com. Go there, join us. You'll find all of our videos. And when I mean all our videos, all of them, from Alexandra's channel, from my channel, from the Duran, from our community, from our members right now on Locals. Everyone is sharing content, videos, all kinds of great things. Theduran.locals.com. Go to the Duran shop, 10% off when you use the code REALNEWS. Pick up a shirt, a magic mug, and what else? Alex, do you have a magic mug there? Yes.
Absolutely, okay, with the British flag. After all, we're talking about British things. And shirt with the Korean flag, I think. Yeah.
Ah, all right. Cool. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Long sleeve shirt, too.
Long sleeve shirt, because it's still quite cold. But I'm so much looking forward to these hats, because they are amazing. We got the best hats in the world. And I speak as somebody who's bought hats at Locks, and some English people know what Locks is. So, you know, there you go. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I guess they make good hats.
They make very good hats. But ours are better.
All right. And also go to the new media video platforms, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rumble, and free speech platform, Super U. You'll find all these links underneath this video. Take care.